How about that Mac Studio, huh? I've been looking for a computer exactly like this for years. I've been constantly switching around between a MacBook Pro and iMac. I was considering the Mac Mini with an external screen, but it wasn't powerful enough, even the newer M1s. And the Mac Pro was just way overpriced and probably overkill for most of the stuff that I do. So the Mac Studio actually fits right in. So this, for me, is probably the perfect desktop computer that I might actually never buy. Why not? Well, let's talk about it after the intro. My name is Zeapon Cooper and welcome to Monkey Pixels. Let's talk a little bit about the specs of the Mac Studio. Because, well, the M1 Max, and I have the MacBook Pro 16-inch right here, and I just got it, started editing on it, is completely insane. I can cut through 4K RAW, multiple streams, play Hearthstone on the side, download apps, and the entire thing doesn't even get warm. So I can't imagine needing more like the M1 Ultra. But apparently for some people there is a reason for it, big production houses as well as maybe some coders and 3D rendering. But for me as a video editor, the M1 Max is probably the sweet point, might even be overkill. So for me an M1 Ultra is for now absolutely not necessary at all. But it also comes with an M1 Max, and that is the exact same configuration that I have in my MacBook Pro, and that for a reasonable price. I think it's about $2,300 for the version that I have in my MacBook Pro. And if you compare that to a Mac Pro a couple years ago, that is insane, because that is a really affordable price and a lot less than my MacBook Pro. But what I'm really excited about is the form factor and the IOs, because they actually gave us front IOs, which they usually never do. Everything is neatly packed on the back side of the device, but now we have two Thunderbolt 3 ports as well as a high-speed SD card reader. And since I just made the switch to a couple of C70s, I'm mostly using SD cards for my workflow, so this is really appreciated. Right now I'm filming in 8K on the new Canon R5C, so if I'm actually going to end up buying this camera and need this for a couple of my productions, then I will need a CF Express card reader, but we do have 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports on the back of the device, so that is plenty, and that is a lot more than I have on my MacBook Pro. And IOs and ports have always been a problem, and even though the MacBook Pro gave us a lot more now, I still only have 3 Thunderbolt ports. Having connected multiple RAIDs, hard drives, different accessories, as well as card readers all the time, that sometimes becomes a problem. Whereas having a total of 6 Thunderbolt ports plus 2 USB ports is absolutely amazing and all that I could ask for. Especially since right now, basically all of our peripherals are USB-C or Thunderbolt, and a couple of them even have the daisy chain technology, so I really don't think that I would ever run out of ports on the Mac Studio. Whereas with my MacBook Pro having a 4K display attached as well as a RAID system, and then oftentimes I do need an SSD to transfer stuff over so that Franco can edit, that already limits out all of my ports. And if I need something else, I just want to charge my phone or my keyboard, I'm running out of space. Especially since I have 2 RAID systems and I need card readers to transfer a lot of footage over a long day of shooting. So here, 3 ports is just not enough, and I need to start using dongles and docking stations. I also really love the form factor in general. It's basically a beefed up Mac Mini. It's a bit taller to accommodate for more thermal design, and I love that choice because it fits on a desktop, but it's really not that invasive and you can actually carry it around and take on trips, unlike the Mac Pro for example. But what I really like about that form factor, and that's why I was looking for something like this for years, is if you have an iMac, it really doesn't make sense if you want to upgrade your hardware, you always need to throw out the entire baby with a bath. The bath with the baby? Do you throw out the baby with a bath or the bath with the baby? Let's just throw a baby. So whenever you want to upgrade your specs on your hardware, you always need to get rid of that gorgeous 5K display and basically buy an entirely new 5K display, which over the years has pretty much stayed the same. So that is just a waste of money and you're really not flexible when it comes to changing your hardware around. So for me, not even using the internal 5K display, because I'm usually working on a 43-inch because I just like to have that bigger real estate, it's just a waste of time of having this 27-inch 5K display just as my secondary monitor to have the Finder on, some WhatsApp and iMessage chats. And it's just a waste. So for me, it's really great to have this really powerful machine in a small form factor. So if I want to switch that around, I can in a couple of years, but the monitor setup will stay the same and I have full flexibility of which kind of monitors I want to use. So if I really wanted to nitpick and say something bad about the design of the Mac Studio, then, well, it does look like a Mac Mini and it doesn't really scream power. And considering that this thing is more powerful than the current Mac Pro, it really doesn't look the part. But overall, that's obviously not a problem and it will still fit in nicely on any desk with all of your peripherals. So now to answer the question, why won't I be getting a Mac Studio? Because I said in the intro that this is the perfect computer for me, but I will probably not buy it. And this is because we're in a kind of weird spot right now when it comes to all the M1 computers. Before, the size of the computer determined the power it had due to thermal design, but also because of the size of the hardware. A fully fledged Mac Pro had a full-size GPU, for example, whereas a MacBook Pro and the iMac only had smaller laptop-based GPUs. But all of this doesn't really matter right now with the M1 technology because the SoC has a shared hardware and everything is so small. If you look at the 24-inch iMac, for example, this thing is basically empty. The entire hardware just sits on the chin and everything above is just thermal design and monitor. But the biggest issue has always been the thermal design because the small computers were not able to cool the processors fast enough. I remember when I had the MacBook Pro and it was the 2019 version, which was pretty powerful at the time. As soon as I connected a 4K display and even looked at Final Cut, the fan started spinning like crazy and I couldn't concentrate. It was so annoying. I couldn't record tutorials with the MacBook on the table because that thing was so loud. And that was something that I absolutely hated. And for that reason alone, I constantly switched back to the iMac because it was just better at cooling and overall also didn't have the issues that the MacBook had when it came to thermal throttling. But as I've already said, this really isn't a problem anymore because the Mac Studio, the MacBook Pro, the 24-inch iMac, even the MacBook Air, they basically all have the same hardware inside. And again, these things for some reason don't even get warm. Usually when I was powering up my MacBook Pro from 2019, I immediately hit 90 to 100 degrees Celsius as soon as I started up Final Cut. With that 16-inch MacBook Pro, I really tried to get it hot, but there was no chance. I was running 16 streams of 4K multicam sequences in Final Cut, played Hearthstone on the side, did other stuff, did open Photoshop as well as Lightroom, and maybe I reached 70 degrees. So thermals isn't really an issue with these devices anymore. So for me personally, why would I take a Mac Studio over a MacBook Pro? The MacBook Pro is as capable as the Mac Studio, except for the M1 Ultra version, which I already stated, I think is complete overkill for 99% of people out there, especially for video editors. So why not just take the MacBook Pro, hook up external displays, and well, be able to use it when you need to travel as well. And that for me is a perfect solution. If you really don't need a mobile version, you never leave the house, you have a studio at home, this is where you do all your editing and you need the extra ports, then the M1 Mac Studio is definitely the way to go, especially because with a decently priced monitor, it's also cheaper than the MacBook Pro. So my stance on the Mac Studio is that it's an absolute amazing computer. I might have actually gotten for it. We probably won't see another iMac for a while, if ever, because well, paired with the new Apple display, I think that is a good as iMac replacement that we can get. And again, we have two ports that we can just interchange if we wanted to. So I definitely, for one, don't need another iMac. I think the Mac Studio plus the Apple display is a perfect combination. Speaking of that Apple display, because that is something that people are a little torn about, because some people are really amazed by it and also think that it's reasonably priced, whereas others think it's way overpriced. And I think I stand somewhere in the middle here. You're getting a 27-inch 5K display that looks absolutely gorgeous. And if you have ever worked with any kind of Apple display, may it be the MacBook Pro, the 5K iMac, or the XDR Cinema display, it looks absolutely amazing, and those are the best screens that I have ever used. With the current technology in all of the newer Apple products, you also get different kind of color profiles, and they are all the same on all of the different kind of Apple products. The cinema display as well as the MacBook Pro. So in theory, if I connect the external display to my MacBook Pro and I look at both screens, they will exactly match and look exactly the same. And that is a really cool feature too. The display also comes with 3 USB-C ports as well as 1 Thunderbolt to connect to your computer, and I really appreciate that one as well. So hooking this up to my MacBook Pro might ultimately just get rid of my ports issues. Then again, I really do need those high-speed Thunderbolt ports for all my raids, but that might just be a me problem. Furthermore, it now also features a 12 megapixel webcam, and this one is ultra wide and supports center stage. So that is a pretty cool thing if you're constantly in video chats and Zoom calls. It also features true HDR at 600 nits, and again there's different opinions of if 600 nits is enough for true HDR or if you need at least 1000 nits, and for me personally it doesn't really matter. I never delivered anything in HDR, so this is something that I can't really speak to, but maybe I will in the future, and I think having a 600 nits HDR brightness monitor is also a pretty cool thing. Last but not least, it also features spatial audio speakers, and they were talking quite the amount about these new speakers, so I bet they're amazing for a screen, but as a video editor, they just can't be good enough for me to want to edit on them because, well, it's physics. So overall, this is something that I also don't really care about that much. So now take that monitor that now comes with a stand, add the $400 adjustable stand to it, and you're at $2,000. And that is quite a lot of money. And I think it is something that I would consider if it was a little bit bigger, because the biggest issue I have with the monitor is its size. It's only 27 inch. I would have loved, especially with a small bezel design, if they went up to 32 inch, for example. 32 inch would be a size where I could consider just taking 2 of them and then using them as my main editing bay. But for now, I just prefer having a larger monitor, and I'm currently, again, editing on a 43-inch monitor because I do a lot of multitasking, I do a lot of multicam sequence interview editing, and for this, I just want a really big screen. And I'd rather have a screen that is not as high quality as the 5K Apple display, just to have more real estate. So here for $2,000, for me personally, I think it's a little bit too much for a 27-inch. But if 27 inch is the right size for you, I think the Mac Studio or a MacBook Pro 16 inch connected to that display is an amazing combination. Even take 2 of these monitors and you're probably in editing heaven. So there you have it. Definitely amazing times for us computer nerds out there, especially video editors, because we're getting spoiled here. My MacBook does so much, and I'm curious as to if it plays back the 8K that I'm recording on right now. And if you're interested about that camera, the R5C, then hit that subscribe button, because I will do some reviews on the MacBook Pro as well as on this camera in the very near future. And if you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up, because it really helps the channel grow. Subscribe for more, and I hope to see you on the next one.